Spencer.
Here.
Michael.
Here.
Bailey.
Here.
Schwartz.
Here.
Spencer.
Here.
Spicer. Young. Another quorum.
Public comments. Anybody here from, I don't see anybody here from the public willing to step up to the mic, so we'll move on to department presentations. Since the chairman of the parks has just come to our wonderful city hall, we're going to let them go first this evening.
Great. Good afternoon.
Surprise.
Sort of new.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to present today on behalf of the Jefferson City Park Commission. We recognize the valuable role of the park system and the facilities that we have here in Jefferson City. And we are excited to show our proposed budget for fiscal year 2024 through 25. The budget is not a financial document. It reflects our commitment to creating inclusive and accessible spaces that serve our community's diverse needs. Through careful planning and extensive community engagement, we have identified key projects that align with our JC Park System Master Plan, which has guided us since its completion in 2018. Currently, the actual fund balance at year-end 2023 was $7,394,398. This is well above the minimum required fund balance of 10%, which is $1,113,346 of budgeted operating expenses. 2025 revenues are budgeted at $11,162,874, and expenses are budgeted at $12,572,366. $1,409,492 is needed from the park balance to balance the budget. Without any unforeseen expenses in the current fiscal year 24, the park fund balance would be around $2,035,017. The fiscal year 2025 required fund balance of 17%. We have identified a total of 11 capital projects with funding available in the 2190 Parks Fund capital improvements. Among these projects includes, and you have received it, Linder Park Playground and Safety Servicing at $200,000, which is a new project. McKay Park, which is a new project at $30,000. Inclusive Park Plan of $25,000, which is also new. Arts Cultures at $20,000, which is a new project. These upcoming are repairs, Pump House renovation at $40,000, Huff Park Lake Road at $40,000, and pump hose renovations at the golf course of $15,000, which is also repair. The master plan update, as you know, we stated in 2018 we started the master plan, so we're going to invest $65,000 so that we can move forward with the new master plan. The Olympia for the ice arena at $125,000, Toro Workman at $40,000, and the Link Capital replacements of $33,937 for a total of $633,937. Are there any questions for us at this time?
Questions from the committee? Councilman Spencer.
Just clarification, you said your percentage of reserve fund balance is what percentage? 10? Did you say 10?
10.
10%? Okay.
It's at 17.
17. Okay, that's where I
We
was.
read off last year's, and it was required at 10% last year.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Speaker. Spencer. Are there any other questions?
Proceed.
Thank you for your time and allowing us to share the Jefferson City Park Commission fiscal year 2024-25 budget.
Any other questions from the committee for, it's the only shot you get at them. Councilman Spencer.
Just a follow-up. First off, I'd like to thank you and the commission for really aggressively addressing some of the maintenance issues of existing infrastructure that we have in our community, especially in Ward 3 of the Memorial Park Pavilion. That is a vital piece of infrastructure in our ward that is utilized a lot. And kudos to Director Jefferson for addressing an ongoing issue that we had last year as it relates to Memorial Park with the music and sound that was being echoed in the neighborhood. Didn't hear one complaint this year, so I don't know what you did to address that, but it knocked it out, and just appreciate that. So good job.
Chairman. Councilman Allers.
Thank you all for coming here tonight. I didn't see, one of your Parks Commission meetings you addressed, was there a Wi-Fi that you were addressing to better boost the experience of people showing up in there? Is that included in for this year? What one of the Parks meetings I talked about that, and then also the rehabilitation of that Memorial Pool where you talked about, we saw the pictures from the gentleman that showed up to do that is all addressed in this coming years.
So to answer your first question, Councilman Allers, I think you're addressing possibly the AT&T cell tower that we're looking to enter an agreement with them if we can negotiate terms out at Ellis Porter, which would improve the Wi-Fi signal for area residents as well as park users. So we're not there. We're still negotiating. We hope that we can come to a conclusion very soon on that. So hopefully I answered your question on that. And I think that's the project you're talking about. And then secondly, in regards to Memorial Pool, we have identified that, if we want to gain, another 10 to 15 years out of the life of the pool, we're going to have to invest approximately, $1.1 to $1.5 million. So this year, part of our plan is we have put some money back in reserves, approximately $350,000 to kind of jumpstart that fund. So we are working towards, we've already identified it obviously through the assessment that we're going to have to make those updates at some point. So we've started to save some money for that.
I know some people probably ask why we would, eventually you have to dump that much money, but if they saw the presentation from the gentleman that was hired to look there, they've actually built the pool on top of the pool without filling it in, and it's caused a lot of the cracks and all that. So I'm glad for that presentation, and that pool, it's used a lot. So I'm glad that presentation was made, and thank you for your.
Can only lead to one conclusion, in my opinion. Either Councilman Michael did a decent job, or you've already fixed everything. So,
I would thank you. I would like to thank Councilman Google, but we have been working very diligently to make sure that we can run an efficient park system.
thank you all, and you're done. You go home.
Thank you.
Well, you can.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I don't know her.
it sounds good.
Ms. Perry, we're going to transition to you in the general fund, and
I just want to start
Have a
off by
blast.
saying that the Parks Department did provide a 3-page document. So if you didn't sync your packets, there is a separate folder out there in the budget meetings folder for tonight's meeting, and it has their 3-page presentation in it. So you'll at least have the information that they've provided. So I'd like to start on page 30. The first pages in the document are actually for revenues, and we did approve the revenues during the last meeting. So page 30 actually starts the expenses for the general fund. This is the mayor and council, and some items to note here. Maybe to start off with things that will have changed across the board. So we did put in pay increases of 3% for general fund employees. Police union and fire union are under contracts at about 2.5%. The loggers rates for the general fund went down to 11.1%. They had previously been at 11.8%. Police went up from 17 to 18, and fire went up from 51% to 52%. Dental increases are reflected at a 5% increase. Health increases are reflected at a 10% increase. Tuition reimbursement was removed across the board. That was one of the decisions that will be reflected in Mayor Fitzwater's budget as you look through it. We have gas figures that were updated by Public Works, and then the mayor, the city administrator, and I did review those and modify them accordingly based on historic trends. We used an 8% increase for utilities. We have been notified of some of the changing utilities that we'll have, so we tried to build that increase in there. And I think that's all of the changes I have that will affect most of the departments that we've got. So starting in the mayor and council, the first item of note is that the salary for prosecuting attorney is reflected at a $5,000 increase. This was a request that was made by the prosecutor, and we also have the same thing for the municipal court judge when we get there. There are very few other changes in this department, with the exception of the very last line on this document for purchase of equipment. And there is an additional $35,600 that's in here to modify the audio in this particular room. We would be going to gooseneck mics. They would be not wired. And I also do not think that they would be push to talk. I think they would be live all the time, but it would also provide necessary equipment to hopefully improve the sound experience for those watching at home and on the YouTube and our Teams meetings. Chairman.
Any questions about the Councilman Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The company that put this in, will that potentially could be the same company that would do the remodel, if you will?
Hopefully not.
Councilman Joe?
So was the 36,000, did that come from getting bids, or did that come knowing what it cost before? Or
No. Those are some price quotes that we have. They are not firm figures, obviously, because of the dollar amount. We'd have to go through an official process. But that is an approximation of what we believe it would take to replace all the microphones. That would be microphones not just for mayor and council, but also at all of the staff seats. And we would have to go through an official process for that.
will we be notified when that is open for people to place bids for that?
I believe at that point, with that dollar amount, we can do a bid process as opposed to an RFP, but it may be something that, because it's more extensive, we do want to go for an RFP for that. It will definitely come back to council for approval.
Any other questions for citywide? Steve?
The next department is the city clerk, and I think Emily Donaldson is prepared to talk about her items.
The biggest change in my budget is the election line item, and that's in anticipation of an additional election for the capital improvement.
Moving forward, if the directors or whoever can just, if they're going off a specific page, just say what page number it is so we can follow along.
I am on page 33. That's all I have really. That's the biggest change with the election expense.
One of the other modifications that we made across the board was we rearranged some of the software licenses. They had previously been put into maintenance agreements, and so we tried to align them with software and just keep maintenance agreements for things like copy machines and stuff like that. I think that in this particular budget, there is an increase in software that is for the next request,
Next request.
which is the open records request portal. It was funded by council last year out of additional sales tax funds, and because of that, it's an ongoing cost that comes back into the general fund for the ongoing charges as we move forward.
See,
Next will be page 36, and this is the city administrator. This has some additional costs in it for marketing. Since we have Molly Bryan on board, we have got some things in there for marketing to do with the new rollout of logo and things like that she's currently working on. We've also got some money in here for some community engagement meetings and ward forums. And one of the things that's a little unusual is that we do have a cell phone in this particular department also from Molly. We removed her cell phone allowance and we are providing her a city cell phone so she's not getting so many calls on her personal line. That is really all I have in here. Is there anything you wanted to add, Brian?
Nope, you hit on them.
Any questions for the city administrator? Seeing none?
I'm gonna skip several pages in the book as we move forward because they are grant departments or grant funds that we have. And so there will be no budget in these until funds are reappropriated from year to year. When the grants were accepted, we would have recognized the revenue budget and the expense budget, and they'll reappropriate from year to year. So we are actually going to skip to page 46, which is the CDBG entitlement grant. I don't know if Director Smith would like to speak on this, but essentially what we have done in here is we have got some estimations on workforce for the neighborhood services grant areas. And we have an accounting from Ms. Cinzy as to how much time will be put into each of the grants. And when we reappropriate funds, we will take care of the grants that we've already received. The funds that are in here for personnel services are the funds based on Ms. Cinzy's projections that the city will be covering through the CDBG portion of the grant. And so that is what we have in here at the $46,000 for salaries, and we have some of the other personnel costs associated with it. This particular grant typically receives more money than we budget through our initial adoption of the budget. When that grant comes in and is awarded, we will bring before council a memo for grant acceptance that accepts the entire grant and in turn modifies this 149 department for whatever additional portion of grant funds will be coming in, and we'll account for it accordingly, but at the time when we are awarded the grant and it comes to council for the grant acceptance. Anything else?
No, I don't know if I have a lot to add to that. I don't think there's any too dramatic deviations from the past years. The 5-year consolidated plan, which kind of sets out the work program for the next 5 years, kind of aligns with the money budgeted in that program. But other than that, I don't have a lot to add.
Any questions? Seeing none, proceed.
Next will be page 49, and it would be the city attorney's area.
Thank you. So I'm on page 49. Thank you. So essentially, my budget's flat from the previous year. In fact, by my calculation for non-personnel services, it's actually down $156. So not much change from last year. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the lawyer? Seeing none, proceed.
Next is page 53, and it's municipal court. And I'm going to apologize up front. I failed to ask the municipal court administrator to come to this meeting, so that's my fault. She did not have any changes in her budget, really. This has been passed through the municipal court judge, but the one thing that, as I said before, did change would be the salary for the municipal court judge. It has a $5,000 increase in it, and those were requested. The prosecutor and the municipal court judge were requested some time ago, and we told them that they would have to wait until this budget process for us to address those with council.
Court questions? Seeing none, proceed.
Next is page 56, Human Resources. On this particular budget, just a couple of things to note, really. There were some part-time funds that were previously funded out of this budget for a wellness position and some overtime. I removed both of those items from the budget. We have modified our wellness program. We've simplified the wellness program. I don't feel like it takes as much effort to accomplish all of the tracking that's associated with it. And so those items have been removed, and currently we have Cindy Bitterman assisting with what functions we do require on the wellness program. Also, HR had previously contained the funds for the employee awards luncheon that we do in the fall of every year. And so I have moved those funds out to the non-departmental, really the entire city. So we moved it out into non-departmental to be able to track it and utilize it in the manner it's intended to be utilized. And we've got Molly Bryan helping with some of those things along with the employee engagement committee and stuff like that. So I just felt more comfortable with it being in non-departmental as opposed to in human resources. Those are really the only significant changes within this particular department.
Mr. Chairman. Councilman Martin, quick question, and I don't mean to go backwards, but I just thought you were talking about the city prosecuting attorney and then the municipal judge. Would they normally fall in line with our, whatever we give city staff to make a separate request annually in order to receive an increase of any kind? Or?
So they are treated similarly to council members, I think, where they're paid as an elected official. So I think they get one paycheck a month just like council members do. And it is not an hourly rate, it's a flat stipend for the year. And so they have never been treated in the same manner as far as percent of increases or anything like that. In fact, I don't recall in all of my years here that there's been an increase.
No, there was an increase passed in 2016, came in effect in 2017. So those salaries are approved and set forth by ordinance in the city code, same as the elected officials. And because they're elected officials, any pay increases can only go into effect after the next ensuing election. So essentially, you only have a 2-year or 4-year term. It can only be done on a certain time frame because essentially what the law says is that salaries for elected officials cannot be increased until the next election for office. So there's really an impossibility to treat them as a regular city employee. But it has been some years, 2017 since.
So I noticed there's a line under contractual utilities total. New line, it looks like it's like 48,000. I noticed then down below at the bottom there, another line that has had quite a bit of money and it's almost zeroed out. What is that about?
So that's what I was speaking of earlier when the city clerk presented, where we have taken things that truly are for software licenses and moved them into a software license account. Previously, they had all been included under maintenance agreements. So we are trying to make the distinction there so that as we move forward, we are able to keep better track of all of our software contracts and monitor any built-in increases on the contracts because we have such a high number of those. We want to make sure that we're not overlooking something.
Thank you.
And that'll be across the board.
Councilman Smith.
As it relates to the HR department, I just want to say thanks to you in particular of you stepping into that role. I know it's an added responsibility, but from my perspective and the comments that I hear from employees is that it's been very seamless. There's been no notice of disruption on any needs that they have. And so I really think you should be commended on that, and also the rest of the staff that's fallen in behind you as well. I mean, I know it's not just you, it's others like Molly's picking up some, and Cindy, and I'm sure others as well that I can't recall. But again, thank you.
Please proceed.
Next page will be page 59. This is the finance department. Within this particular budget, you will see one additional accountant for succession planning if council approves this. They're struggling right now to get everything accomplished and be able to transition work to the appropriate staff members, and this would help us with that. There's also on audit services, a 10% increase that was built in. If you recall, we did have a request from Evers & Company to terminate the agreement that we have. So we went out for RFP on audit services. And at the time we prepared the budget, we didn't have the RFP responses back yet. We have received the responses. We evaluated those today and are making a recommendation that we hope will come before council on September 16th. I will say that the staff recommendation, we're about $3,000 short from what we put into the budget, which is pretty decent, all things considered, with the issues that we've had in the past trying to get some RFP information for audit services. The other item of note is that I do still have the OpenGov software in here and the OpenGov integration with Springbrook. We agreed when council approved those purchases that we would utilize a vacancy we had for the lowest level position in finance and accounting technician position. And so that position we are still leaving vacant to assist or offset the costs of this particular software. And it should cover the costs in totality. And those are really the only changes in this budget.
Councilman Nugent.
The removal of the tuition reimbursement, I see that from previous years they were fairly specific amounts. Does that mean that tuition reimbursement requests were collected prior to the budget process?
So in finance, for example, I would ask staff, does anyone anticipate needing tuition reimbursement? And they would tell me how many hours they anticipated needing or utilizing, and I would put that within the budget request. Again, as I said earlier, tuition reimbursement is something that was removed across the board for all departments and all funds. So I take that back. I may have just misspoke. I'm not sure about parks. But I know that in every other fund, including enterprise funds, they were removed across the board as one of the budget balancing measures that we took.
Okay. Has Parks removed that fund?
To my knowledge, I don't think we've ever had it in there. Yeah.
Thanks.
Councilman Hall.
Ms. Sheila, I was wondering, how much money was saved or spared by eliminating tuition reimbursement?
I have not looked that up. I do have it listed. I feel like it was about $20,000.
Across the whole city?
Across the board. I do have a list that I have that I could email to council on that.
All right, thank you. I was just curious the impact of that.
Councilwoman Joe, sorry.
With the tuition reimbursement, do we have a lot of people who were utilizing that?
It really varies from year to year. I know that most departments are kind of like I am. They ask to see who has the need for tuition reimbursement. I do think that probably your larger departments like fire and police utilize it more so. And our belief is part of that could be because, especially with the fire department, they potentially have some downtime that they have been known to take classes and courses. But it does depend from year to year just what staff that's in the request.
And then I have another question for the OpenGov software. Is that an ongoing expense where that position will continue to not be funded, or is that like a one?
So OpenGov is a cloud-based software, which is what most softwares are going to. And so, yes, it is an ongoing cost. I believe that the contract we signed was a 3-year contract. And we had originally agreed in order to get it started and utilized for this particular budget session, that we would fund it with the vacant position. And I do want to point out that is it is a lower level position. And we feel like it has, at least in my opinion, been really beneficial. And I think it will continue to be even more so as we get it fully implemented and we move forward. So I do feel comfortable in saying that has been a very valuable tool for us this fiscal year. And I think it will just improve as we move forward.
And I'll just add that on the tuition reimbursement decision, it's not a whole lot of money. It's not an easy decision, but to the best of my knowledge, and Brian can speak to this, there was no, unlike the state used to do it, they may do it again, I don't know if they have it or not, but when they did it years ago, it was required to be within your scope of work. We had no requirement for that in the city. So if you're a street guy and you want to take a class on underwater basket weaving, that was fully permissible with city funds. And so I think that made the decision a little bit easier for us to make, just as a addendum to what has already been said. Councilman Neely.
I just think that, maybe not this year, but in the future, it may be something we reconsider, and then if we do reconsider that item, that we hone that into work-specific courses. The organization realizes the benefit from that a little bit more than if it's not just so broad of an option.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have to agree with Councilman Mealy on this one. In order to have a competitive workforce, I mean, all these municipalities, we're fighting to keep the best talent. By cutting away this benefit, despite how specific and less used it is, it's still an incentive that makes us an attractive place to work and retain the best possible talent we have. So I think eliminating this is a mistake, in my opinion.
Well, I would say 2 things. 1, if you can find the money, you can put it back in. And 2, you got to cut somewhere. And when the general fund is up around 80% spent on personnel in a service-provided industry, we are not providing the service that needs to be provided. This is a employee benefit along with insurance, along with PTO, along with all the other things that they get. It's a small amount of money. So we'll just agree to disagree on that. And if you can find the money, the world's your oyster. Are you finished? Councilman
Excuse me. As it relates to the OpenGov software, I think you've hit on it a little bit. Not been able to utilize it to its fullest extent this year because based on when it was implemented, it's really been a short period of time, and you've gotten it up and running quite extensively. So congratulations on that and your staff to get that done, number 1. And then number 2, for ongoing payment plan for these upgrades, contract services for this program. Have we thought about implementing some of the shared cost of our enterprise funds to cover that in future years?
So first part of your response, We are not currently utilizing OpenGov to its fullest extent, but we're not finished for this year. So what you guys have in this budget book, this document was produced by OpenGov. The benefit to that software is that we, as finance staff, are not manually entering all of this data over and over and over and creating pie charts and everything else. You create the report once and it spits this out forever. So it's a huge time saver. The piece that we are still working on, and we have meetings as early as tomorrow to start, is the outward-facing piece for the public. And so this will be kind of real-time data. They'll be able to go in and you will be able to click on anything that you want and it'll kind of filter out the real-time data for you. So we are working on that. We do intend to have that implemented for this budget season as well. We just haven't gotten there. As far as, what was your second question? The enterprise funds are currently paying because this is part of the finance budget, and the finance budget is part of the administrative costs that we capture and disperse out. It is included in what Parks is paying and what all of the enterprise funds are paying as well. So we are getting a portion of that back into the general fund through that administrative chargeback.
I'm really excited about the other side of the coin of this program and platform is of the public portal and what they're going to be able to access. And I know all of us thrive on open, transparent government, public constituents that we represent. So I think you've taken a big bite out of the apple. So good job. I really wasn't expecting that piece to be rolled out so quickly. So thank you.
Councilman Lester.
Just wondering, is Parks with development of their budget also using the software?
Yes. So this year, really kind of every process that we went through within any city budget was really gone through with the Parks Department. They entered their budget in. We generated some reports for them to take back to their commission. So the documents that they presented to their commission, some of that information came out of OpenGov as well. So we were able to kind of extract what they needed for that. And then this particular document, for the most part, came out of OpenGov as well.
Thank you.
Anything further? Finance. Proceed.
Next, page 63 is non-departmental. A couple of changes here within this. I talked earlier when I was discussing HR that we had moved the annual employee awards luncheon over to non-departmental. I did end up increasing the dollar amount that went in here for that by $2,500. The amount that was in the budget is just not enough to cover a citywide function where we feed everyone, where we purchase service awards and everything that goes along with that. So that number was increased. It has not been increased for quite some time. So this is really something that if we want to continue that particular event, which is one of the only times that we have recognition of staff at this point on a regular, consistent basis, that's a necessity. There's also some money here for employee engagement, and that is also kind of rolled into some of the things that we have Brian trying to work on, not just for knowledge for the general public, but also getting our staff involved in employee engagement, and not just within their own area, but across the board. We're trying to have some functions that are citywide so that we have an opportunity to interact with those that are not necessarily individuals you would interact with on a daily basis. There are some additional funds in here for the City Hall landscaping for parks. It went from $10,950 to $15,500. That takes care of all of the landscaping here on the City Hall campus. And they provided some information on the cost of that. And so that has been increased in the non-departmental budget, as well as recognized as revenue in the parks budget. We increased insurance deductible by $30,000. We've had some significant vehicle accidents that are going to require that this number be higher as we move forward into '25. This has historically been an account that has been underfunded. So we have some plans in place to look at those particular claims and see if there's anything we can do to mitigate those as we move forward. But it has been underfunded, so we do need some additional funds here. The mayor included $10,000 for the Chamber Talent Attraction Program, so that is included in this budget. There's an additional $10,000 for Salute to America. That's in addition to the 10 that was there, and you heard Mayor Fitzwater speak last Thursday as to the importance of this combined with the 200th anniversary. So there's $100,000 in there for the 200th anniversary. And there's also $25,000 for City Hall security. And that would involve a variety of things that City Administrator Crane has requested. And it would also kind of look at a survey of security strategies that the police department had previously provided. Those are the significant changes for non-departmental.
Councilman Spencer.
On page, I have 63, under other operating expenses. It says public art in 2021 was a $3,500 balance or budgeted in that year. Has that been zeroed out, or is there still some dollars left in that item?
So that has been zeroed out. That was something that previously came, I think, from the general fund. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that that is now in the Parks Fund, and it's kind of incorporated within what they do.
Okay. I just didn't know if there were still funds in there. I was going to.
No, that has been removed for several years now.
Thank you.
Councilman Mueller.
I had a question back to the parks, or the fund that pays parks to do the City Hall campus landscaping. I know traditionally that's been a lot lower than what landscaping costs are, and Parks has always made campus look really nice. I'll appreciate that. The information that they provided you, Ms. Perry, that you mentioned, was that information equivalent to the 15,000 that we've put here?
That, I believe, was actually the request of Parks for that revenue amount. And so they requested that amount as revenue. That's what we put into the budget for the expenses.
Thank you.
Yeah, staff put together a good report on actual costs that we're incurring and became really true numbers, and they've done a good job working with us on it.
Any other? Moving on.
Okay, next will be page 66, emergency management operations. Chief, I don't know if you have anything to add here, but I'm just going to say this is a department that we created last year when Chief Schofield was in the interim. There had been some discussion, I think, about emergency management actually requesting more funds than we had historically done. And so we thought by pulling this out of the police department, which is where it had previously been accounted for, that this would just draw more attention to it as we move forward. In case emergency management did request that again, we could have them come in and actually plead their case. That I'm aware of, we did not have any requests from them this year for additional amounts.
No, and one of the challenges with this one is that, their cycle is both unique and different because they're working with some of the EMPG, I believe, funding through the state, and that is on a different cycle than our city budget as well as the county budget cycle as well. And so this is a cost share arrangement, as you would probably recognize. It doesn't fund the full amount. It is a portion of it, and I believe traditionally it's been half of half for the entire office, which includes the director of emergency management, that admin assistant, and then any other expenses associated with the office. So,
I think so that sums it up pretty good.
well, we did think it was important last year to pull it out so that it could be recognized individually for when there is an increase or a decrease or any kind of changes, that'd be much easier to track for council to see what that looks like historically.
Seeing none? IT.
Next is page 68, which is IT. The items of note here, we did include almost $139,000 to replace switch infrastructure. This is something that is a necessity for us to get accomplished. Council previously approved a couple of meetings ago some additional funds to be dispersed out of capital improvement sales tax. I think IT got $33,000 there, so that is also going towards this switch infrastructure replacement. So these are citywide type infrastructure items, so it's not just IT, but as it relates to IT infrastructure, it is a necessity as we move forward. They also have a vacant IT tech support position. It's been vacant for, I think this is potentially the third budget cycle now. We previously had a network administrator, and we struggled to be able to fill that vacancy when it came about. And so we have used those funds to contract with Infinitec Network Administration for our third-party network administrator. They're the ones that help set up the network. They're familiar with it, and it seems to have worked really well. They do have an on-call type situation, so it has for the last 2 years provided all of the necessary support we need, regardless of the time of the day that would be. So we propose continuing on with that in the coming year. And then I do have one position reclassification here. So I have 4 system analyst positions, and we have an IT manager who is probably 2 years away from retirement. So we are intending to reclass one of the system analyst positions to a senior system analyst. It would be a step up with the intention that it is for succession planning, and that the IT manager would start to transition as much as possible to kind of that upgraded or stepped up position that we have. So we would have 3 system analysts and a senior system analyst as opposed to 4 system analysts.
Seeing nothing. Looks like you're done, huh?
Yes, we would now be on page 73 for the police department.
Thank you. Excuse me. So the police department actually administers 5 separate budgets. We have the police general fund, we have a school resource officer budget, we have a Mustang drug task force budget, animal control budget, and 911. There haven't been a lot of drastic changes to those this year. As a matter of fact, SRO, Mustang, animal control really didn't see any significant increases or decreases at all. When it comes to every budget that we administer, the primary expense is personnel costs. So overall, our personnel costs are 88% of a $13 million, $700,372 budget. Then we get into contractual services, utilities, repairs, and maintenance, and capital purchases. As I stated, SRO, Mustang, animal control, and 911 really didn't see any major changes. We note that our police general fund budget did drop from $9,954,000 to $9,687,000. We did see some increases in a few line items as office supplies, first aid, operational supplies, and our awards program. We also did see some increases in building and grounds maintenance and vehicle washes and software licenses. Where we saw the biggest reduction, the city administrator has asked that we look into a vehicle lease program as opposed to what we've done in the past, which is the purchase of vehicles. We've been doing a lot of research on that. Trying to get with Ford, we're trying to get with Enterprise. We did get some response from Enterprise. We also look at Dodge, Chevrolet, and then also some private leasing companies just to see how this is going to play out over the long term. Some have been responsive, some have not been that responsive. So we're going to work with what we have this year to look towards a vehicle lease program to see if that becomes any less expensive than what we've done in the past. But other than that, not a lot of major changes in any of the budgets. Be happy to entertain any questions if you have.
Councilman Spencer.
As it relates to the school resource officers, have we had any recent conversations with the school district about the percentage increase in salaries?
I personally have not. The school district reimburses us 50% of the SRO budget line item, and I have not addressed any increases.
The mayor and I have met with the superintendent of schools and discussed that program. So we have that open dialogue.
Thank you for that. No further questions. Thank you.
As an add-on to that, I just want, my 2 cents is something we really need to look at, increasing the percentage to the schools. I know that these officers are working 40 hours a week for over 9 months, not including football games, all the other extracurricular activities. There's now 2 high schools in this city. I think the city provides a well-needed asset to our local public schools, and I think it's time that the public schools contribute more to the entire cost of this program. It's getting more expensive every year. The 50% match isn't what it used to be, so in my opinion, that's something that we need to really push for as we move forward. Any questions for Chief Lodi? I guess. Yeah.
If I can piggyback off that, the school resource officers is an excellent program that builds confidence and relationships with a lot of students that probably never have a interaction with an officer. And I just know with having 2 daughters attending the new high school, Capital City, and the type of architectural design that was implemented in that facility, which is somewhat concerning, but it's well past our time to make any changes there. But having a police presence there is really, really important as a parent, and I really value the program, and that was the genesis of my questioning of the cost sharing percentages. I think I definitely agree with Chairman Schwartz that it is time to really look into that possibility of an increase in that program. So, thank you.
Councilwoman Joe.
I had a question about the animal shelter budget.
You had mentioned something with a reserve fund for the animal shelter in our last meeting. Can you clarify what that was?
So there is a reserve for animal shelter fund that is a restricted portion of our fund balance that comes from donations that are made to the animal shelter. And I do know that over the last couple of years, we've had some estates that have put some pretty significant amounts of money into that reserve for animal shelter. I think right now it's got about $250,000 balance. That is, the reason I brought it up previously was because we put into the budget for use $25,000 of that reserve for animal shelter, and we put it towards care of animals. The argument has always been that reserve fund has been intended, or people contributing to it, intended for it to be for care of animals. And so that is historically what the uses have been. I'm trying to think, I can't think of any examples of what's been purchased out of it previously, but it has always been, I think, intended for care of animals.
Is that like a normal amount to come out, about 25,000 per year of that, or?
No, that fund has continued to grow, especially over the last year and a half, because I know that there were 2 estates that had pretty significant contributions into that. So there's really no normal amount to put in. I wouldn't say that it is normal for us to utilize funds out of there, but at the same time, it's been growing pretty substantially. And so that was one of the decisions that was made for the mayor's budget, was to put $25,000 in to utilize for care of animals.
Generally speaking, I would say that when it comes to that fund, so across those 5 budgets that we have, we compete for one pot of capital improvement money. So to spread that money among the police department, the animal control, 911 stretches that pretty thin sometimes. So my philosophy on the use of that fund is for capital improvement type expenses that do enhance the responsiveness, the capabilities of the animal shelter itself.
Councilman Neal.
Are we able to see in any of this budget, that fund over the 6-year or 5-year?
In the document that you have, it won't, I don't think there's a line that reflects that. I can provide that information as to whether or not we have utilized. Are you asking about what we have utilized in the past?
What the fund balance is at date certain for 5 years?
I can provide that information. It's
That's
not
no
something
problem.
that you would find in the document.
But it just
Yeah, I can
educate myself.
I can email that.
Looks like. Thank you.
Anything else for Chief Willoughby? He got off easy.
Next is going to be page 90, which will be the fire department.
Chief Schofield.
Yes, thank you. I'll go through real briefly the few changes that are included. And most of them are pretty small and really just reflect kind of past usage. Got in the case, $100 increase in postage, $200 increase in dues and publications. It was also appreciated, every little bit really counts for us on small tools. It went from 6,000 to 7,000, so we appreciate the approval for that. We do end up utilizing that for a lot of just various equipment items that we have for the fire department. So there was a $2,000 reduction in, $1,000 reduction in professional services, which does kind of vary from year to year. Primarily that goes to pay for our medical director, medical control officer, physician that oversees our program. We also have the same medical director that Cole County EMS does as well. The utilities have already been discussed, and that's appreciated too, to keep pace. It's an area where we've had to move money in the past to cover just basic expenses, so it's appreciated. A couple things that I'll highlight on building and grounds that were included. We have a couple different areas kind of adjoining to we call the apron or the tarmac of the front of the stations. Station 1 has an upper lot. It's kind of close there to High Street. So it's a seal coat. Try to keep up with, because if you let it go more than about 5 or 6 years, you really start to get a lot of decay and it's hard to come back from that. So a seal coat there at Station 1 on that upper lot. And then also something similar at Station 4. Adjoining to the kind of the side lot, kind of closer to the back of the golf course there. Then at Station 5, there's also actually a chip and seal. And we kind of used assistance from Public Works that gave us some estimates on what that would cost and that was approved. Not the concrete portion, which is the primary path for the fire truck. It's been in bad shape for a really long time. So that'll be good. That degrading further from deferred maintenance. So those are the highlights from a building and grounds perspective. I think I hit all those. I'm happy to talk about the fire museum, unless there's any questions on the fire department proper. Fire museum really just represents the change in utility cost. I will add that I know that we're working with PPS to try to get adjoining older animal shelter building demoed. I think we're on track for maybe first quarter of 25, hopefully. So that will be a really good thing. I think that will be very welcome, not only for us at the fire museum, but also for the park, because it gets utilized now extensively for parking. So it'll really be community to the area to finally demo that, which is in really rough shape. We also struggle to keep it picked up, clean, a lot of trash in the area, just because that hillside kind of falls off from the backside of the area, and so probably looking to do something there to retain that wall, but just in general, requires a lot of the museum staff. I'll mention that, that facility, for those of you that may not know, we appreciate the city providing some of the utility costs, but really that's funded independently. It's not for profit, and a lot of volunteer hours goes to keeping that building in good, decent shape, which is a challenge for that age, built in 1935. So they spend hundreds of hours and a lot of their own money trying just to keep it in good shape. I think, in my opinion, it's an asset to the neighborhood and certainly to the city long term. We have a really bright future. It just takes a long time to kind of get to that point. So, with the fire museum.
Fire museum questions, Councilman Austin.
How many volunteer hours from the department have been put into the fire museum, and how much in donations has been contributed out of their own pockets?
Probably the best thing would be for me to maybe have the museum board president come to a public safety meeting and present. We can get you the whole thing. We can get you the whole story of the museum and kind of unpack that all. We keep it kind of independent, so it is kind of its own group of folks that have volunteered to do that. So I would want to speak on their behalf. I'd rather.
Okay, I was just wondering if you knew that off the top of your head as far as volunteer hours and donations. That's all.
I don't know that it's even tracked, but it's extensive, and it's been we're probably into our 9th year maybe at the fire museum. It is a very rich history, and I believe has a great potential. So I think a lot of great work in that project in general, because really, the way we see it, Fire Prevention Month is coming up in October. We see everything about that museum as being fire prevention oriented. We always have a prevention message. The history of the fire department is intertwined with the history of the city, and if you go down there and see all the different exhibits and displays, very evident.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Spencer.
Can you give an update on the status of the, while we're all here, on the new ladder truck?
And it has taken longer than we had hoped. As you will recall, I think that came through council in December last year. And we had hoped to have it here by now. It is in St. Louis, so it has been delivered from the manufacturer to our local vendor. So just last week, it was delivered to our dealer, our manufacturer's representative in St. Louis. And so they're doing some upfitting, some final upfitting, doing all sorts of other very small things, but important things. So we hope to have it here in about a month. Now there'll be some training that has to occur. That should be fairly minimal because a lot of the function should be pretty similar to our current fleet, but we're working really hard with them. We've beaten them up pretty hard to get it to us. In fact, we twisted their arm and they extended the warranty. I think the factory warranty was like a year. And so because it was delayed, they've agreed to extend that to 3 years, which is a significant financial benefit to the city. So that's a really, I guess, a silver lining to being a little bit later.
Thank you very much.
Will the warranty cover a bad driver hitting a telephone pole and shocking
I
you?
don't think that electroshock is included in the that's fortunate I can tell.
And that was not the, that was to no fault of any personnel.
One thing I might add, and I may be a little bit out of place, but I will say we were brought up as one of the departments that uses a lot of the tuition reimbursement, and that is true. And I would just say that, that is a high priority for us. We also we recognize the need for it to always be related to our profession. What we're seeing in the industry is that a lot of the specialty command level classes, the upper level classes, the upper level certification requirements require some gen eds. They require a bachelor's degree in some cases. So what we see, the ones that I approve are always through an accredited program. If it's accredited of some sort. So I can tell you that while there may not be official scrutiny applied citywide, I know that we do that as a department. As a department director, I feel responsible for that. So we do scrutinize it. It is always related as either a general ed requirement or a bachelor's accredited school. And then many of the other programs that we utilize also require bachelor's to be allowed into the program. So I'm sure it's not much different for the police, but I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit more perspective.
Chief, the question, is that something, if the city can't afford, is that something the union can pay for?
I wouldn't want to speak for them, but that's something that could be explored.
Councilman Hazelton.
I wanted to let it be known that whenever I spoke up about the tuition reimbursement before, I spoke up with our public safety and our finance and our legal department in mind, because maintaining the profession through education is important. And if we can promote from within through education, for example, we're eventually going to, you're not going to be here forever. We're going to need a new chief. It's going to require new training, new certifications, things like that. We should be backing his education. That makes sense. Of course. So that's why I spoke up about the tuition reimbursement being something that we should maintain. Promote our force from within. Chairman.
Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, that's a $2,500 line item. Did I read that correct on there?
For which one?
For the training.
The tuition reimbursement.
Yeah, tuition.
Actually, it was last year. It was $7,500. I requested an additional $2,500. Okay. And I'll be really straightforward with you, Councilman. I've already spent this year. If you look at the year to date, I'm already at 11.9 for this year. So it has been something we have promoted internally. And then in 2023, we spent 13.7, which was over the amount we had. And the arrangement I had with previous city administrators was, if I could find the money somewhere else in my budget, I felt like that was such a high priority for us. Now, again, that means we had to be very conservative in other areas to move money into that line item. But for me, it was a high priority.
So just to follow up, and then thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's an additional $2,500 on top of.
That was my request.
That was your request.
The tuition reimbursement programs that I'm familiar with capped credit hour. You can go to a university, higher education, this operation that you want to go to, but we're going to pay maximum 500 a credit, no matter what that cost. Did we have something like that?
We pay a credit hour that's equivalent to Lincoln University.
Nothing was based on grade, right?
I'm sorry, nothing.
Nothing was based on grade.
So you have to get a certain grade and
But there's no differential between an A and a B and
No.
a C.
no.
And I
They
think that's
just
how
have
the
to have
state does it.
They have to have a passing grade and I think that's it.
That'd be great to me.
They do have that's a good point, Shelby. They do have a stipulation tacked on the end of it that you have to be here for so long after you receive the reimbursement. Don't quote me on this, but I feel like it might be 3 years. And then I think if someone leaves before that, we prorate kind of what they have to give back to the city. But as you said earlier, no stipulation that it has to be something that pertains to your job duties at the city.
And I'll just add to my comment that I'm hopeful to work with my colleagues here to maybe see what we can do to reintroduce those funds. A lot of things that we packed in there in the last 20 minutes on tuition reimbursement, but there's some individual values that we see. I think those are good.
Seeing no questions.
Next
Clint
page
Smith
is- Next page is 98, and that would be where Planning and Protective Services starts with its administrative area.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, so PPS has 7 different budgets within the department. 5 of those are for core divisions, with 2 of those being within the planning division. It's planning and NPO, and then the administrative division as well. So I'll go through these a little quickly. We've got a handful of noteworthy changes that I'll stop and discuss a little more, but if there's additional questions on anything within there, I'd be happy to go back and discuss those further. I do have 2 reclassification requests that I would actually address once I'm done with all the different divisions. I'd kind of like to do them at the same time. So starting with page 98 is the admin division. Very little change there, no significant additions to positions or operational costs. Moving on to planning. Page 101 begins there. Again, very few noteworthy changes there. No new programs, no new real operational supplies. We do include some maintenance agreements, movement in between software license and maintenance agreements, as Sheila had mentioned earlier. So you may see a few changes there, just moving basically the cost of some of the software that we utilize in and out of different accounts. NPO, which is the other portion of the planning division, that begins on page 104. One of the significant changes there I would add is the inclusion of $250,000 within the professional services account. That is money that would be going towards the tri-level study that the MPO Campo has been discussing recently, and recently selected a qualified party to put together that study. 200,000 of that would be coming from the CPG, the Accelerated Planning Grant. 25,000 of that, if you recall, would be from the city, and 25,000 from the county. So that 250,000 includes all 3 of those budgets all in one. So that's not necessarily a $250,000 increase to city costs. That just captures what Campo would be administering. Next division, starting on page 108. Our neighborhood services / redevelopment and grants division. We have a couple changes in there. I would note salaries change a little bit. That does change kind of year to year depending on what the projected admin budget from the grants that are being administered from that department. So those salaries kind of fluctuate a little bit year in and year out, depending on, again, how much admin we can basically bill to those grants. The other significant addition here that I would like to mention is within the, again, professional services, which is towards the, let's see, middle third, the bottom third of page 109. That is the addition of $100,000 to that account of professional services. This is money that we had targeted towards a couple different things. One was the potential of using that money for the acquisition of tax sale properties that would be available through the county once those properties has basically been available for a certain number of years. So there are certain properties that we're looking at this year that have been unclaimed for several years, and there's benefit, we believe, to the city to acquire those properties, and then to basically have those properties be acquired by someone that we can then control to how they would redevelop. A portion of that $100,000 also could go towards another program we're working on right now, which is recently we put out an RFP for a housing development projects. Some of that money may be looked at as far as putting towards some of the possible development programs that we see coming in through that RFP. So a couple different programs we think we could draw from that $100,000 in that budget. If anybody has any questions per division, just go ahead and ask. Otherwise, I'm moving through the divisions. Next one is our environmental health services. Generally, our health department, they do inspections of restaurants and other facilities in town. That department or that division, again, very few changes, no personnel changes, no real changes to equipment or operational supplies. Next would be our property maintenance and code enforcement division, starting on page 116. A couple noteworthy things in there. The abatement line item, which is at the very bottom of page 117. So in the past, we had budgeted, or had been budgeted, approximately $10,000 for abatement. Generally, our average cost of abatement per year has exceeded approximately $30,000. So I think after further conversations with the city administrator and finance director, we're looking at an approach to actually budget the amount that we know kind of upfront that we would be spending in abatement each year. In the past, I think the assumption would be that after that initial allotment would be spent, we would come back with a supplemental request for abatement. We think this might be the more responsible way to address the abatement costs. In the past, they had been, like I said, exceeded $30,000. With the removal of some of the Bishop properties, we think those costs would drop. As you can see this year, I think we're approximately in the $14,000 range. So we do think $25,000 would generally cover what the abatement costs would be going forward. The other increase would be we are asking for $125,000 in the demo fund, which is the top line item on the next page at 118, or excuse me, at page 118. Approximately the cost for one residential demolition is about $25,000. So we were looking at $50,000 so that we could possibly complete 2 demolitions. If you look over the past fiscal years, we've been able to utilize much more than that for some backlog of demolitions. A lot of those have been accomplished, so that list is shorter. But we do think 1 to 2 is probably a good budget moving forward in order to keep up with demolitions as they do occur. Another portion of that would be approximately $75,000 for a potential larger demolition that we might incur going forward. So with those two together, it would be approximately $125,000 for the demo fund this year. And the last division would be our building department. Again, that does begin on page 120, but no significant changes there for salaries or operation or supplies. So that really concludes the 7 divisions.
within the PPS department. The one thing I would end on is I would be requesting basically 2 reclassifications for positions within the department. One of those being the neighborhood services supervisor, the other being the property/housing inspection supervisor. Both of those are classed as supervisors at a pay grade of 112. I'm requesting to reclassify them both to managers and increase their pay grade from 112 to 113. Based on my time here, I think the complexity of work that they do warrants a manager title as opposed to a supervisor title. They do participate in complex and complicated projects within the divisions and within the department as a whole. They participate in the strategic direction of their divisions. So I do believe they kind of exceed what their past role had been as supervisors. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that, but that reclassification, again, would be from a 112 to a 113. Designated as managers, and 113 is kind of the base level for a manager within the city. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thanks. In PPS, remind me how many planner positions are vacant, or how many planner positions in 24 have remained vacant, and what those statuses are.
Within planning?
Yes.
So right now, I don't consider there to be any open positions in planning. Prior to this budget, within, I think, fiscal year 2022, there had been 4 planner positions within the planning division. 2 of those positions, from my understanding, were eliminated. So right now, we are fully staffed with 2 planning positions, but there had been previously, I think 2 budgets ago had been 4 positions. I think that's probably what you're referring to.
That is, yeah, some time had got away. The work that those 2 planning positions did at that time was absorbed in the 2 current planning positions.
Correct, and I think those positions at the time they were eliminated weren't vacant positions. So yes, the job responsibilities have been absorbed generally by the existing staff. I say we have had conversations about the kind of the workloads of that staff and looking at additional staffing going forward. But right now we have the 2 planning, 1 in the MPO, 1 short-term planning, and 1 planning manager.
Councilman Lockwood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When those 2 positions were cut, any unintended consequences as a result of losing them? That's 50% reduction.
I think anytime you lose staff, you're going to have to make up some of that ground somewhere, whether it's a little bit longer response times to phone calls, to emails, to inquiries, to the citizens and developers stopping within the city. So I think sometimes those times may get elongated a little bit. Start possibly having some delays in work product as well. I would say, I wasn't here before. I think we had our 2 staff. So all I can really comment on is how they do now. And I would say they are operating, I'd say, at a fairly high capacity. But I don't think necessarily we're dropping any workload. I think it has been accommodated. But again, I think adding staff in the future is something that would be a benefit to the department as a whole.
I also want to say I agree. We definitely need an extra hand in the planning department. I remember speaking about that and asking what would be the biggest thing that could help you down here, and you said I could use an extra person. So, and I mean, it ties right in with we're open for business. We want people to get in, break dirt, and start their project or their renovations in the building as soon as possible. So it's really important that we help people get through the bureaucracy as quickly as possible, and having an extra planner is going to aid that.
Okay, at this time, let's go ahead and do Public Works tonight. That will save capital for Thursday at noon. And then as far as committee discussion, if there's not any tonight, we can, after the capital purchase discussion at noon, I think we're gonna have a hard stop at 1 o'clock that day. So we can do the discussion at that point if there's anything, but
Chairman, we are going to have several other things to talk about. We've not talked about some of our special revenue funds. We'll have public safety tax, we'll have capital improvement fund. So there will be quite a few things that we still have to get through in that 1 hour at lunchtime, so.
come prepared to work. Mr. Marash.
Yeah, thank you. I gave you a cheat sheet here with the page numbers and just kind of a very quick glimpse of the budget. More or less, like others have said, they're mainly the same budget, but I try to highlight some of the big numbers in each budget. We'll start page 123, central maintenance. That budget, you can see, is very much the same. One of the big ticket items in central maintenance is the vehicle parts, and that fixes anything that breaks in the city with the exception of parks behind me here. They do their own, but police cars, fire trucks, whatever, public works, etc. So anyway, we often look at that budget and you can see how it grows over year. That's obviously due to issues. But I'm going to move through these fairly quickly unless there's questions.
Councilman Spencer.
As it relates to central maintenance, we lost one of our great mechanics due to retirement here in the last, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We already replaced that?
We were able to replace that person fairly quickly, to my surprise, and so hopefully, you know, of course, they're new and not as seasoned as the previous fellow.
But he was able to work on specialty equipment as far as our fire trucks.
So there's going to be a learning curve, no doubt.
Correct. Well, good job. Thank you.
Hope everything works out there. Okay. Move on to administration. Much the same budget. Administration basically just is myself and a couple administrative people. But what we do is house the general fund gas budget there, the 110. Obviously that moves around a little bit depending on gas price. So it's a little bit of voodoo math how to get there. But that's a big chunk of that budget besides salaries. No questions. I'll go on to engineering, page 130. Almost the same budget as previous year, about $10,000 difference. Of course, some of the line items have changed a little bit. I will say, point out the traffic counters and speed feedback signs were funded in this budget as some new equipment. Our old traffic counter was just out of date and no longer supported. So those are frequently used. We try to count different parts of the city all the time. But also when we have citizen requests about speeding and various things on their streets, that's where we use those. Speed feedback signs, we had one new one we purchased this last year. That was kind of a popular item in some of the residence area. We get a lot of requests for that, so we put a few more in the budget here, and that was funded as well. One thing I would touch on, I know Clint's group is working on getting it to more electronic plan review submittals, and so we had about $1,800 in the budget for some large scale monitors for our engineers to review those things. That wasn't in the budget, but that would certainly be helpful if we're moving to that electronic plan review. Moving right along, streets. So the discrepancy, the 8 million versus the 3 million, basically that's all highlighted in green there at the bottom. That's the equipment plan, and our city administrator, Brian, asked us to put all the equipment needs in there. So I heard the story before about the 2005 equipment. I'll touch on based on that in a second. But anyway, some of the big ticket items there, if you look at the street budget, of course, a lot of them are moving around, but the salt budget, $295, that is greatly dependent on what the winter weather is like. So we try to start full, which we are. We have this budget that'll give us one more fill up, but sometimes we exceed that. We'll have to come back for a supplemental appropriation. Sometimes we don't, and so we move that money maybe into, say, street materials or something like that. Try to do a little bit more there. The next big ticket items, the street and stormwater materials, I combined them here for $375. We could almost spend about as much as that as you could put in there. That just buys the concrete, asphalt, et cetera, et cetera. And so about this time of year, we do look at that budget and see if we need to transfer money into it. Or sometimes we switch to, we have some things we've saved up, like, for example, we're doing right now with curbs on Edgewood. Those are in bad shape. That's a lot of manpower, but very little outlay of material costs. So we'll go ahead and do that, just depending on how the budget is looking. The street light number, great big number, that is basically rental to Ameren UE. And so all these little street lights you see that aren't shoebox lights or the downtown lights, those are ours, and we pay electricity on those and maintain those ourselves. But anything like a subdivision, we call colonial lights, that's a leased light from Ameren, and that's what that number is for. So that number is more or less a utility number with some maintenance associated with it. So it's a big number. Then just back to the vehicle and equipment, we put in there, again, the 05 equipment. So we have we track that very closely. It's about a $4 million need there. I believe what was in the budget, if I'm reading this right, we put in about 125 in that item, and that was to look at leasing some equipment. And so I believe that's what the goal was there. So more work to do on that, of course. Look at that. And I just looked up, it was ironic because I was here back then. Back in 05, we talked about this, and that's why that equipment is so old. But at the time, the council, we put in $2.2 million back in 2005 budget for equipment and vehicles, and that almost dovetails with inflation to where we are today. So kind of see how that kind of makes a little sense there. I got to know that I got enterprise on the back sheet. If we can keep going, it kind of skips through to different pages, but keep moving. So airport, we had 10 budgets in all in public works, over 130 people. So there's a lot of variation here. But page 224, you look at airport, the request 517 to 408. Some of that is some of the equipment that we didn't fund in there. But one thing of note in the budget, though, the general fund always has to subsidize the airport. So they don't make enough charges for service, which is the next line down. 210 is what we charge. Flowage fees, rent on building, land for buildings, etc. We generate about $210,000 at the airport. Part of the expense is an admin charge because it's an enterprise fund, so it goes back to the general fund. And so we track that just to be fair and with other enterprise funds. But this year the general subsidy is $60,000. And another thing that happens in these funds, they go back, I think it's if I'm right, Sheila, they go back to the audited 23 budget and see what's left over and move that forward. And so you can see that subsidy if you go back and look at it year to year. I think it's 131 last year, so it's only going to be 60 this year. But a lot of that is we're able to roll some money forward from that audited number.
Matt, question, forgive me for my ignorance, but on an airport, is it customary that they wouldn't be revenue neutral and that they have to subsidize? Is that commonplace?
I would say that's pretty common in these small airports. Brian has experience probably in Mobley as well. Absolutely. I know he used to work in Lee Summit. I think he was subsidized there as well. Okay, parking, next one, enterprise fund. We put in quite a bit of capital here a lot of times, but I know there's a lot of changes going on in the parking, so that was pulled back out. So the budget about $1 million. Just some of the notes I made here, revenues more or less equal to expense there. But what that does tell us, we have raised our fees and rates there, and so, but we're running right at expense. So a bit of that is how we're enforcing, and a bit of it is still COVID hangover, people coming back, things like that. So that's just something to note there as we move forward. There is no subsidy for general fund here. We have a good fund balance, and that's what's helping look at the new garage construction and maintenance there as well. The admin, so the general fund doesn't put anything in. The admin charge from parking back to the general fund's $163. Down to transit, page 238. $3.5 million, but request 3.1 million funded. So the revenue, just it's kind of interesting. The revenue on that is 1.74 million in grants and other federal programs. And then we do make a charge for service there as well, 215,000, another 50K and some other items.
And so anyway, you can kind of see where that is. That's about $2 million between grants and charges to support that $3 billion enterprise. The general fund subsidy this year is $614. So that's down considerably because, again, that transfer from surplus occurred. We saved a lot of money from 23, and a lot of that was decreasing our routes because we had lack of staff. So not only we had less payroll, but we had a lot less gas fueling the buses since we were down so far. So that has helped that number there quite a bit. Down to wastewater, page 246, it starts. Another pretty large budget, about $15 million budget. And admin, just kind of something to note, it looks like a big old budget. It's only got a couple people in it, 7.2 million, but the bond payments, et cetera, are 5.2 million of that. And then the admin chargeback paid back to the general fund is 820. We did include a position upgrade. This was a succession planning item that wasn't funded, but we have a vacancy there, but our director is nearing retirement, so probably something we need to look at there. And then the other budgets in that, collections, so that's all the pipes that collect it and take it down to the pump stations or across the river, 2.2 million. We had a little bit of equipment wasn't funded there. And the treatment plant, I highlighted that green because once I started looking through here, I was like, well, I don't have all the details, so it's not on the iPad yet. So I think maybe just had a glitch there or something. But the overall number is there in the beginning. So we have to work with finance, see where that is. But 3.7 million, that's our treatment plant and pump stations. A couple $100,000 not funded equipment there as well. And capital projects out of our fund balances there. These are non-bond projects, 1.9 million we have in here for various improvements. So that is all the budgets of Public Works, and I didn't talk about like CIP projects or anything like that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would there be an opportunity for grant, or is there a grant out there? Because I notice on the streetlights, quite a bit of that is for utilities, right?
Oh, yeah.
Would solar help in any of these categories or any of that?
Well, again, it's rental from UE, so undoing that, I think there was some legislation passed on it. Some cities in St. Louis are trying to do something, but so they are hooking onto their own system periodically throughout the subdivision. And so to convert that to a private system would be tough. You'd have to undo all that at this point.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of what we found. It would be nice to maybe do that, but be difficult.
I would mention Ameren is converting, or
Yes.
if not, has already converted most of them to a more energy efficient bulb.
You see them real bright, and then some more kind of yellowy looking ones. The LEDs are in the real bright.
So probably not solar, but definitely more energy efficient bulbs.
I think eventually we might get a break on that, is what I understand.
Yeah, it's supposed to bring down our rental rate a little bit.
I don't know if it's happened yet, but
Actually, it slows the increase.
Yeah.
It slows the increase.
Councilman Spencer.
I just had a question as far as it relates to wastewater. Are you concerned or comfortable in your current state of cybersecurity?
right. Cybersecurity, so we do pay attention to this, obviously, and all of our systems, we have not converted to any web-based type thing that somebody can infiltrate, is our hope. And so if something happens at a pump station, we get a page still. Somebody has to go out there, our phone call or whatever. Then we physically send a person there. We don't just go try to skate it online and try to diagnose it. We send somebody there that's on call. So that's one way to not have problems. But yeah, certainly we attended a conference last month or so, and it probably should have been geared more towards IT folks really than us, but it gave us good flavor of it.
So some of our delayed technology has been a benefit in some areas.
I should point out the parking servers are still an issue in another division. Those are not been taken out yet. Like I said, if we wanted to convert to that license plate reader type stuff and get rid of those servers, I know IT fusses at us about it a lot. That would be one way to secure that more.
Thank you.
I shouldn't go into that too much.
wastewater division were to be interested in a grant, start writing a grant, who would write that?
Sometimes we do it ourselves with help from our engineering, or sometimes we get some consultant service. Just depending on what it is. So right now, we're looking at some sewer extensions, and one of them's talked about a lot on Northwood. Some codes that go along with that, et cetera. But there are some programs, so Bartlett West is actually kind of looking into some of that for us. So there, yeah.
Any other questions? Besides Jeff, any other questions? Mr. Highlander?
Mr. Reisick brought up a point on some of the elderly that do not have the applications, don't want to maybe use them, all that. Were there ways that you have addressed it already about could they get a tag or something? Could normal people, is that something that was?
There's plenty of parking still available with meters. You can park in the garage and pay at the booth. That's just that one lot since we can stand it up quickly. But there's probably a point coming that go to other cities, it's pretty much all by app or pay station.
Sounded like you were asking for yourself.
Right now, we have a lot of opportunities.
Is there any committee discussion, anything anybody feels like they need to say at 10 after 7 on Monday?
I would move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?